Great, thanks. Hi everyone, hope you're having a good conference. Hope day 2, morning 2 wasn't too stressful. Depends on how you went last night. We're going to talk about metrics a bit, but we're going to talk kind of like around metrics. Let's see, is this working? No, try this again. I know you're supposed to eject things safely, but who has the time?
Very agile approach.
This was working. Do you want to try another one?
Yeah. You move on to the next slide. I can test it out if you like.
Yeah, okay. So just a little bit about me while you're waiting. So I've been kind of working in Agile for a long time now, it feels. I haven't got the beard or anything yet, been around the block. XP was where I kind of started, so that's my background as a developer. I'm also involved with the Lean Agile Brighton conference. If you like conferences by beaches, bear that one in mind. We're on in October. Okay, so I'm assuming almost everyone probably was at Jeff's keynote yesterday. Okay, so hands up if in your organization releasing software has become a non-event. Lucky I want to work where you work. There's a few people. Okay, so I think that like for most people, it's still very much an event. So it's not a non-event. I wish it was a non-event. It could be a non-event, but in most places, it isn't a non-event. So this is going to link into what I'm talking about today. Now, I'm not a metrics expert, but because I've been around for so long, I've been using metrics for ages, creating metrics. You know, I'm not a metrics denier. I'm not here to say, don't do metrics, not like what you were saying earlier. And I'm not here to explain any specific metrics either. So like you probably are all aware of lots of metrics. They're all out there in the universe at the moment. There's so many of them, and there's lots of good ones. And this is actually really more about like kind of when to use them and what to use when. So just eggs really. I mean, I think that we're over-egging it a little bit. This is where I'm coming from for this. We're over-egging it on metrics. Like there's too many for me in most organizations I've worked in. And we either have too many eggs or we're putting too many eggs in the cake recipe too early, right? So it's just like kind of way too many eggs. So I'm an enterprise agile coach, so I tend to be involved in large transformations. I know people have kind of feelings around the word transformation and agile transformation, but effectively that's what we tend to be doing in bigger organizations, right? Is having, we're going in, we're looking at ways people work currently and trying to move towards what we all kind of believe to be more agile ways of working, which we think are good and better ways of working. And is anyone in that kind of position at the moment? Is there any like kind of agile coaches in the room who are involved in transformations? Who would say they're in a transformation kind of, right? Okay, so there's lots. So this should be familiar to you, right? And you're going to get this, right? The pointy-haired boss from Dilbert, he's going to come along, and I get this all the time, and he's going to ask me a question like this. Right, are we agile yet? Familiar to anyone? You get this one? Never. Or if you doesn't ask that, it's going to be like, when will we be agile? Right, so give me a date. And how agile are we? Give me a magic number. Now, I love magic number. Magic numbers, the band, they're fantastic. But I don't think that we can get a magic number for how agile we are. So this tends to be my kind of response, really, is right. Well, yeah, you're paying a load of money for this agile transformation, so I think you're entitled to ask these questions, but they're not really the right questions, or they're questions that I can't give you an answer to. So that leads us to, and this is my last egg reference, okay? So we scramble around for some metrics that actually can prove that we're doing some good work, right? So we think like, well, we know we're doing some good work. We feel like we're doing good work. So like we're working with all these teams over here, and it feels like they've got less waste in their system. They're kind of producing more on a sprint by sprint basis, or their process is more stable. Is that the kind of stuff that tells us we're more agile? Maybe. Is it a leading indicator of agility? Maybe. So we might feel, and I definitely get this, is where a lot of gut feel that things are going in the right direction, or we're improving upon what was here before. But when someone comes along and asks that question, I'm like, well, prove it. That's difficult. And yeah, so it's hard, right? Because you can be doing lots of little changes that are going in different directions. And I mean, I definitely feel that. I mean, especially if you're working across lots of different teams, or if your organization has got lots of different teams, all of them are doing some little change that's relevant in their particular area. Cumulatively, you have to think that's good. But again, when pointy-haired boss wants the magic number, it's not really much use to you, okay? So, so what do? We say, well, right, boss is on my case. He wants some numbers. He wants some metrics. Oh, well, we've got a load of metrics because we're using Jira, or we're using some other tool that can create a dashboard for us, right? So we'll give him one of these. Fantastic, right? So now we've got metrics. But what's in there? Like, a lot of it is not really very useful. I mean, does anyone kind of look at these and think, right, I'm not interested? Like, if you get a dashboard, there's probably one or two things that are relevant to you that you look in and you say, all right, well, that's actually something useful. But the rest of it, like, I mean, really, who cares for a lot of it? And a lot of it is stuff that's just automatically generated from the system. So you're reliant upon the integrity of the data that's being put in, whether or not you can rely on this anyway, right? And we've got loads more of this. This is just the kind of stuff you can pull out of Jira, right? You can get all kinds of reporting tools, and people are off making Power BI reports. This is the latest thing, and it's like fantastic, great. We love it. We get the whole thing about like measuring stuff is good, using the baseline, doing some action, and then remeasuring afterwards. These are good things. I'm not here to kind of dispute any of that, okay? Good stuff. We like measurement. We like the scientific approach. That's not in dispute. But I mean, this is the thing for me, is like, I mean, I think in the larger organizations, it's going to turn into an industry. Am I touching a nerve?
I'm the data and information formal council, and I struggle with that story. I want to tell a story.
Lovely. Yeah, great.
But that's not what everyone else wants to see.
I did forget to mention at the beginning, I'm happy to take questions, or even have discussions as we go throughout this. I like a conversational kind of way of working, rather than just me standing up here and trying to make you laugh. I'm not a stand-up comedian, but let's have conversations. If there's something that I'm putting up here that you think, you're not really living in the real world, I want to hear that, because some of this is just stuff that I'm kind of like spewing out that's been on my mind in recent engagements that I've been working on. So please do ask questions, or feel free to contribute and have a discussion within reason. And we save 5 minutes at the end for open floor discussion as well, and questions. But yeah, so like I feel like there's with the best intentions, people are saying, well, he wants metrics, she wants metrics, we'll give them metrics, right? We've got all these metrics. We can put dashboards, we can put reports together. We've got the tools. Off you go. You can have metrics up to here, and so we measure everything. And I'm not sure this is a terrible image, but well, the image is fantastic, but the quality is terrible, so please excuse that. But I have been in this situation very recently, where like there are 4 times as many people measuring the work of the change agents than the number of change agents that you have trying to do the work. And then, of course, what that does is it takes away a big percentage of the change agent's capacity for reporting progress back to the people who are measuring the progress, in order to generate the reports, much of which the report receiver won't even understand. It all just feels a little bit wrong to me, and that's really what I'm kind of moaning about, I suppose you could say. But just to go back to the industry, it's like, this is a very costly business, actually, and it's a real distraction from the business of change and transformation. I'm hugely will stand behind that argument, right? But I mean, someone could say to me, well, the response I'm going to get is, well, tell us how much of a distraction that is. What's the cost of this distraction? Give me a metric that's going to prove that, right? It's like, okay, I'm just going to spend all of my time putting reports and measurements together, and let's just fingers crossed that the agile stuff is going to stick. So we don't want to be in this position, do we? And you know what I find really, 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 really infuriating about all of this, right? I've been around for a good while, right? So I was around like my early career waterfall projects. I feel blessed to have experienced it because it has helped me to kind of work it towards different ways. But this is the thing that infuriates me, right? I did work in waterfall projects and nobody ever asked us to produce metrics about our ways of working when we were working in waterfall projects, right? It's all about the delivery of the project. That's all that is concerned about, right? Now, all of a sudden we come in and we land into organizations and to teams and we say, well, we're not even convincing you anymore that Agile is an improvement for certain ways of, certain contexts. This is known good patterns of working that we're trying to implement, right? It's not even a discussion anymore. It's common knowledge in a lot of cases, some of the stuff that we're trying to do. But yet, now you want us to prove how effective those things are. Whereas before, you couldn't care less. You just wanted the product out the door or you wanted the project delivered. So I find that really infuriating that we're adding this tax and taking away and distracting from what, the good transformation work we're trying to do. We're trying to find good ways of working. We're trying to take these patterns and adapt them to our own specific context so that it's not just everybody's doing the exact same stuff. It's like, this seems good. How would we tweak it and make it work for us, right? That's the kind of stuff that we want to do. So like, where were the waterfall metrics? Where are we starting from? Like, I often feel like saying back to someone like, well, if you want me to prove that the agile ways of working, you want the metrics around that, what's your baseline? What metrics do you have from the previous ways of working so that I can show you how much we have improved? They would never have that. And yeah, I should start asking it because it might help solve a problem for me. Yeah. Oh, actually, I forgot to ask. Any Malcolm in the Middle fans? Is this bringing back any kind of memories for people from when they were kids? Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't say I'm like a super fan or anything. It was just I thought it was a catchy thing for the talk. This was the bit that kind of gave me the idea. Right? It was like kind of yes, no, maybe, I don't know. Can you repeat the question? That was the hook. What was the question again? What the pointy haired boss ask me is like, kind of like, how agile are we? When will we be agile? Like, well, how are we agile? So if you're asking that question, really, you have to know like, well, what do you mean by agile? It's like I have to say, are we agile yet? What do you mean by agile? How many coaches do we have in the room again? Quick show of hands. Okay, so let's say 10. Now, what I'm going to say next, right, is like you put 10 agile coaches in a room and ask them what's the definition of agile, you're going to get 20 answers, right? So this isn't, I don't think there is a definitive definition of agile, but this is one I'm going to throw out there as a good starting point in relation to this context, the context of agile transformation in organizations. I think that this is what we're looking for, is the ability to move fast and change direction quickly, right? If you were to apply that term agile to an animal, if it can move fast and change direction quickly, you say, yeah, that sounds like a good explanation. It doesn't map exactly to software, but, kind of if we're trying to release products, this is kind of, I think that this does map. So, is a cheetah agile? Yes, no? Yeah. Is a tortoise agile? Is an elephant agile? Is a monkey agile? Is Amazon that can release once every second, are they agile? If you, in your company, if you release once a year, is that agile? If you release once a month, is it agile? Once a week? Where's the scale, right? So this is kind of, but I think that the more you can release, the more frequently you can release, probably is going to link to, and it's going to give a determination of whether or not you are agile, right? So I think that enables us to move fast and change direction quickly, is how frequently you can release software. Because then that, like all that good stuff that Jeff was talking about in the keynote yesterday, really depends on your ability to get change out the door. If you're only doing one release a year, then it's very difficult to do all that other stuff afterwards that he was talking about, right? Which is like kind of then measuring, did this satisfy the user's needs? Did we solve the problems they had? Doing your market research with them and saying, we gave you this, did it work for you? How's it kind of, what could we do differently? Fine, we'll get that improvement back to you next year. Doesn't really cut it. So for me, and this is my personal one, that's the kind of, that's what I mean when I'm talking about agility. And I know there's lots of different layers and everyone will have their nuances, but for me, I think that is a core thing. When we think back to Agile Manifesto, better ways of delivering software, people like to talk about the change in software to products. That's fine, I'm down with that. If you're only talking about products that are software, don't complain about use of the word software. But anyway, it kind of does boil down to that. Better ways of delivering software. So the more software we can release, then the more we enable our businesses and our organizations to change direction, change their minds, launch new things to customers, and deliver more value more frequently. Has anybody ever heard of the CRISP assessment? Okay, cool. So this is just a joke, right? I mean, really, it's nothing to do with crisps. But I do know that I am on just before lunch and I'm the only thing that stands between you and lunch. So this is just a little appetizer. The CRISP assessment is this is a Scrum checklist, which has been around for a long, long time, right? So this is an assessment, like a self-assessment that teams do. Henrik Nieberg, and I think he's involved with, or owns that CRISP consultancy, that they came up with this, this assessment. Right, you don't have to read all the details. I'll just cherry pick a few little bits for you, right? So they've got all these bits in kind of orange here, which are like kind of Scrum practices, right? Which they said, like, are you doing these things? If you want to assess how good you're doing Scrum as a team, are you doing these things? Because they are recommended and they are core parts of Scrum. But what I really like about this, so I'm not saying that this should replace metrics. What I really like is the intention here. So what we look at is focus in on this yellow box up at the top, right? So he says, this is the bottom line. If you achieve these, you can ignore the rest of the checklist. Now, I love that as an approach, right? And this is what I'm going to be kind of taking forward. So are you delivering working tested software every 4 weeks or less? Are you delivering frequently? Are you delivering what the business needs? And is your process continuously improving? If you're doing that stuff, you're probably doing all right. That's kind of the gist of this, right? Now, you can, if you want, go through all those core Scrum checklists, tick all those boxes, and you might not be doing these things, right? So if you are doing these things, you don't need to go into the checklist. If you're not doing these things, maybe the checklist has value, right? So then start interrogating in the checklist, say, well, we're not working in sprints, maybe that would help us. Or our process isn't continuously improving, we're skipping retrospectives. Checklist says you should do retrospectives, so maybe that's a clue as to what we should be doing. But if you start, it's about where you start. Start with the yellow and then dive deeper, or do you start deeper and work your way back up? Fingers crossed that it's all going to work. So that's really kind of the pattern that I want to take with metrics. So, if you focus on the activities, then you might still find that your release frequency is still slow. I've worked with loads of teams. In big organizations, you have organizational impediments that stop you from releasing quickly often, right? CAB processes, review boards, all these kinds of things. Your infrastructure might not be, in such a state that you have got continuous integration or CD pipelines, any of that kind of stuff. You might still have lots of manual release processes, manual and repetitive UA, testing processes, all that kind of stuff, right? So actually, you could be doing really, really well in your team, getting really agile, working, and anyone can come and have a look at what you're doing and say, that's an agile team. They're fantastic, and they're continuously improving. The bit that's holding them back is releasing, right? So this is kind of really, well, like, okay, we're doing really well here, but the thing that we really care about isn't moving. So that's kind of like the wrong way around, isn't it? But we can show some metrics to the pointy-haired boss to say, well, are we agile yet? We're doing all these great things. Or do we want to say to them, yeah, but we're shipping software more frequently? So that's really like kind of, flipping it around. I mean, actually, the bit I want to say about here is like, this is really limited. And this is kind of like, you can take Jeff's talk yesterday as everything after here in my mind, right? It's like kind of, and we're really throttling our ability to do all that fantastic stuff post-release if we're not releasing frequently. For me, release frequency is that real magic kind of the golden kind of measurement, really, or the golden metric that helps us to kind of enable agility. And again, right, so if you look at it and you say, well, okay, it's easy to say, let's release more. But then we find out we can't. And then we work backwards and we say, well, what are the things that are stopping us? So we don't start and say, right, we have to do all the things on the Scrum checklist, for example, and then we will be agile and releasing magically, because you could do all those things and still not release. What you want to do is say, like, right, we want to release more frequently. We can't. What is stopping us from doing that? Now let's work back. And if there are known good ways of doing things in Scrum or in Kanban, or it might be other problems we need to solve, right? It might just be an automation problem. It might be we haven't got skills in CI/CD or whatever it might be, right? What is the problem that is stopping us from releasing more frequently? And then let's solve that problem. And Agile will have lots of patterns and ways of helping with that. And then we release more frequently. We're massively increasing our ability to do all this stuff over on the right-hand side, which is kind of what will help us to be agile in terms of moving fast and changing direction. So yeah, just focus on that bit. So again, just to kind of, reiterate, how frequently we can release software determines how quickly we can move and change direction. Pause at that point. Is there any questions at that point, or any comments or thoughts? Arun?
Thank you for the conversation. I'm really loving release frequency is it's a good measure, because you know how quick a team, the organisation, people can move into a new direction.
Yep.
Do you also see the highest hypothesized value as part of that metric? So one thing is to change direction, to be agile that way, but moving in the wrong direction at a fast rate is not a good thing, I presume.
Yeah, great. No, so it's a great question. So if I go back to this one, like one of the things in the back of my mind when I was preparing this talk is someone is going to say, so thanks, he wasn't a plant, by the way. Someone is going to say, well, if you focus on, if you just over focus on releasing more frequently, do loads more releases, then you could be releasing lots of rubbish, right? Totally. I'd love to be in that position. You don't need to worry about this bit, right? You can block your ears because you can release whenever you want. But I would love to be in that position, and most of the companies I work in to say, like, you know what, we are releasing so much that now we're inspecting, like, are we, maybe we should have done this one before that one. I think that it's about your capability to release, right? You want to build the capability, you want to build the muscles so that as an organization, you can release. Then if whatever problem the business comes to you with, we want to do this, we want to do that. It doesn't really matter if you get the order or the priority wrong. You'll get better at all that stuff, actually, because you know, like, the problem we're solving now is, are we delivering the right stuff at the right time in the right order to people, the most valuable stuff that our customers want? I'd love to be that is the problem that I'm trying to solve. I think if you build you build the track, so that you can deliver at will, and now you can start having much more valuable conversations on that side of the fence, really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
So it's not about, like, kind of just release loads of rubbish or release anything. It's obviously the kind of what's implied there is you're still going to be intelligent around what you're deciding to release and what order and all that kind of stuff. Yes.
I mean, if you want to know if the thing you're releasing is valuable, you have to release it. Yeah.
Yeah, great point. Exactly. Yeah. And I suppose then the thing too is, once we build up that muscle, we want to be in the position where we're releasing smaller chunks, right? Because then it's like, even if we get it wrong, it's a smaller failed experiment. So it's just more about the enablement of getting to that point, which is what we want. Occasionally, I'll work in an organization where we get to the point where development gets ahead of the business, and that raises a whole load of new challenges and problems, right? It's like, it used to be, bloody tech teams, they never deliver on time, we're always waiting. We've got all these fantastic ideas and we just can't get them out there. But then when the tech teams pass the business out, and then it's a question of, like, oh, we haven't got stories on our backlog. And then all the business heads getting together and trying, oh, what do? We need to hire more product owners, or we need, it's like, okay, now we're having better conversations about how we can deliver value to the organization and to our customers, which is
That's
great.
I'd like to.
Are you running out of stories? You're not running out of stories. No one's running out of stories, really. It does happen occasionally. Okay. traps. Yeah, okay, how are we for time? When do we finish? 15:15. Yeah. Okay, so there's a few traps as well. So so what I'm saying is, let's focus on something that really matters initially, right? Rather than going off and building a whole metrics industry. That's one of the things I'm trying to say, right? Is like release frequency. That's my metric in the middle. That's my golden metric that I think if someone says to me, are you agile? Like, well, we release once a year. Not as agile as I'd like us to be. If we release once a week, I'm thinking we're in a pretty good position. We can move fast. We can change direction. If Pointy Hair Boss has a brilliant idea tomorrow, it comes back after a weekend, Monday morning, brilliant idea. We could possibly have it shipped the next week or 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. That's not bad, right? It's like, so that's kind of moving towards being more agile. So for me, it's like kind of, if he says, oh, I've had this brilliant idea, when can we ship it? It's like, well, don't know about that, but we're doing more retrospectives now. It's like, doesn't really kind of cut the mustard in terms of how agile we are. So here's some traps and things to look out for. Right, we gotta love this meme. Been around almost as long as me. But we measure all the things. This is a trap we fall into. And sometimes it's like really well-intentioned and we do it to ourselves. That's the problem. Pointy Hair Boss hasn't asked us for all the dashboards, right? But sometimes we have, and I've definitely worked with some folks like this. They're well-intentioned. They've seen dashboards before in the previous place they worked. We used to have a dashboard that showed us all that stuff. So let's just recreate the dashboard. Now, I've had that in a place where the guy who created the dashboard, well-intentioned, agile coach, data-driven, data-led, fantastic, cannot complain with any of that stuff, right? But what he was taking was a really sophisticated, late-stage model of metrics that he had with a team that he had worked with for a long time, or in an organization he'd worked in for a long time. They'd grown to that point, and then he went into a new organization that was starting off, and he's like, right, there we go. As long as we have all these metrics in place, we'll be able to prove that we're improving at agile and that we're doing agile better. And they were all like, what? Flow metrics? Distribution? Load? What are you talking about? So it was like kind of timing was a problem, right? So sometimes, like, we're our own worst enemies. We think because we're in tech and people love a bit of science and they love the scientific approach that we can measure all this stuff, and we actually quite like measuring stuff, but too much. That's what I feel. Or too much at the wrong time, or too much all at once. You can also get this, right? Measuring the right things at the wrong time. This kind of leads on from this thing of like, what's the context of where you are at that point in time? What is important to measure, right? So we can measure all the things, right? The Formula One car, that's going to have like, heaps of measurements, metrics, telemetry, all that kind of stuff underneath it. You can apply the same things over here for old Pink Panther in his little toy car. It's just not going to make any sense. That's the problem, right? It's the wrong time. It's like a good measure, but for the wrong time and place and for the wrong context. So I'll give you an example, right? I mean, you can measure driver performance here, and it might make a difference, right? Depending on which driver you put in this car, you might be able to get an advantage. You might be able to go faster around that track, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever, right? Now, you can measure driver performance over there, but that's absolutely pointless. He's not going to get that car around the track no matter how good he is as a driver. So if you have you have a team that is releasing once a year, then why are you measuring developer productivity? It's the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? So just thinking about, we can measure it, doesn't mean we should. Like, what's important? What's the problem we have right now? What could take us on to the next stage? What could improve us a little bit? And what would be a metric that we could use to help us with that? That's probably something useful to look at. This is another trap, right? So Pointy Hair Boss asks his middle management team for metrics on Agile. All of a sudden now, middle management team, they don't understand what they're looking for either. So all the metrics, and now this is our way to see, is this team performing well? Is that a high performing team? Because we heard that's a good thing. Right, so high performing team, they should be doing what? More story points every time, last sprint they did 100 points, next sprint 120 points. So this is good. Like, no, but they're using that as a control mechanism. I've had a situation where we've got outsourced teams. It's like, we need to show that they are performing. So what are their agile metrics? It's like, I don't know, that is not an agile problem. I'm sorry, if you want a man with a timesheet and a clipboard and a stopwatch, to measure what these outsourced teams are doing or what any team is doing, then you're not playing the same game as I am in terms of Agile. What we're looking at is how are we getting more outcomes out the door to customers, not is that how many toilet breaks is this developer taking, right? Or how many keystrokes have they clocked this week? So, let's use them for the right purposes. This is one, might sound a little bit funny as I am an Agile coach, but often it feels really wrong when I get asked, to prove how the teams are improving or how Agile are the teams. One of the things that gets forgotten quite a lot in the larger organizations that are doing transformations is the concept of self-organization. Companies still want that level of control, right, over the teams and how they work, but they don't really kind of hand over full control to the teams to self-organize and decide what works best for them in their context. Now, I would really love to make that question the team's problem. So like if you say, well, how agile are the teams, Eddie? Well, let's go and ask that team to prove or to tell you a little bit about how agile they are. They'll tell you, well, this used to be a problem and we made it go away by doing this. And now that has resulted in this improvement. Or we've got loads of stuff stacking up that we can't release because of our stupid release processes, and there's loads of bureaucracy, and that's the thing that we need to fix, but we can't fix it. We're doing really good stuff, we're improving, but we're spinning the wheels faster, stuck in the mud, can't go anywhere. No, that's a good problem to flip back onto the pointy-haired boss, right? To say, like, well, now over to you, right? We're doing our piece, but really, when coaches get asked to show how agile they are, they're going to come up with, kind of measures that show progress, right? It's like, well, and if you can't show it on release frequency and stuff, and all the better stuff beyond releasing, then you're going to go back to, well, we've trained 100 people over here, right? Or this team is now doing 20% more points, or this team is doing 50% more tasks, or their tasks are taking a shorter length of time. These are all the activity metrics. Now, there's good value to be had in that, not disputing it, but really, is that what we're looking for? So you ask the coaches to show their workings, they're going to get that kind of stuff if they can. In the absence of release frequency metric and beyond better metrics, you're going to get the activity metrics. And that's the thing that kind of can create an industry. I prefer to see teams taking ownership of what's more important to them. How can they show their agility? How are they continuously improving? If you go back to that CRISP assessment, right, it's like kind of, are they releasing frequently? Is their process improving? And are the priorities in a good state? Like that should be the kind of stuff that all the teams are solving for themselves. So really, these are takeaways that I'm kind of trying to say, and happy to have more discussions around this, because this might seem like a fairly simple message, which is like kind of, there's loads of metrics, focus on a metric that matters. For me, I'm saying release frequency is one that can really prove your ability to be agile, move fast, change direction quickly. But whatever in your context works, you can apply that yourself. But my point is, you don't need all the metrics at once and at the beginning. Simplify. I like to think release frequency is a very overlooked metric that we should be placing more emphasis on, because it's a real kind of indicator of agility. But then work backwards, because it's not just a magic formula to say, right, we're going to increase release frequency. Ta-da, we're agile. Doesn't work like that. You're still going to have a ton of work when you find out you can't release frequently, but you will be tailoring your approach to solve the problems that are causing you to not be able to release, or that are impeding you from releasing. So simplify your situation when it comes to metrics. And this is like limit MIP, right? That's the message really, right? Is limit your metrics and progress. It's like, they're intended for improvement, right? Like here's a number. We did some stuff to improve that number. We measured again and we improved it, or we didn't. And then you go again. It's like, it's an improvement technique. And if you are trying to juggle like 100 of these at the same time, then you're diluting your concentration, and you're diluting the focus. As Agilists, we try to narrow the focus, right? That's one of our principles that we would have, is like just work on one thing at a time. Limit WIP, limit MIP. You don't have to have just one metric, but it's not single metric flow or anything like that, but it's, just focus on something that's relevant at that point in time. This is a problem we're having. We can't release, right? Let's measure what we currently do some stuff to try and improve that, measure again. Great, fantastic. That's really useful. And use the metrics for good. So they shouldn't be controlling mechanisms. they're for improvement. And a piece of advice that I give then as well is the reality is, right, like you go into you work in an organization, you get asked for metrics, you get asked for reports. Fine, like we might not be able to change that immediately. One of the things I really like to do is to not provide a free report to anybody, or not provide any free dashboard or kind of metrics to people. If someone insists that I produce a report for them, I'm taking that as an opportunity to educate them, right? It's like, okay, well, you have to listen to what I'm going to tell you about what's in the report, and I'm going to educate you as to whether what you're asking is the right thing, or what we could do differently, whether that's valuable, this is not valuable, let's focus on this thing. I'm going to have that conversation, which is a starting point, because if I don't have that conversation, then it's that pattern is going to continue. So every time I said, no free reports. You want a report from me? If I have to do it for you, I'm going to also give you a little bit of a micro lesson on some of this stuff too at the same time. And maybe next time it'll be better. So that's really, those are my key takeaways for you. A couple of final little bits, in case you were hoping for a crisp assessment. Someone did do one. I found out while I was researching. So that should lead you up to lunch quite nicely. Also, as I said, so I'm involved in Lean Agile Brighton. There's a code there for 10% off if anyone wants to attend it. We're in October, so we're not going to be taking any tickets away from Agile on the Beach. But yeah, feel free to use that. We'd love to see you there. It's only a one-dayer, so it's a small, mini little conference. Yeah, that's it really. So thanks.
What do you think of Dora?
Fantastic metrics. I'm from a software engineering background, so yeah, one of the things is you've got DevOps, Agile, there's a lot of overlap, right? And there's a lot of stuff. It's a Venn diagram, right? The Dora metrics, I'm a big fan of, the cultural aspects of it. It's fantastic to see them in there as well. If I was to take it in the context of this talk, there's still a lot in there. And I think actually when we get into the situation of like, all our kind of telemetry about our production systems and our pipelines and all that kind of stuff, I think that's a real area of metric explosion, where there's just like, you can go in and look at a dashboard that the tools provide you. It's like, right now we've got all these metrics. What am I looking at? What should I be focusing on? Would you agree? Yeah. So good metrics like this, and all the metrics that people are using are good metrics. Like all the flow metrics, fantastic. But it's just about where you focus at what point in time. And kind of, there's just so much. Like, let's say this is a problem we're looking to solve. Let's solve this problem, and then let's move on and let's iterate and evolve. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Good. Sorry, there was a question in there. Yeah.
Rather a comment to add up on what Carl said here. So I believe that the release frequency metric requires some balancing metrics. Like for example, time to market, because you can release actually every 2 weeks. If your time to market is 6 months. So
Yeah. Yeah, you can release too much. Yeah.
Also, it's that internal release, isn't it?
Yeah, deploy.
Are you actually getting
Yeah.
any feedback? Because if you're just releasing internally, you can go in the wrong direction for a long time.
Yeah, it's context specific. I like what you said in terms of it being a balancing metric. So decouple deployments from releases, that's one thing, because then you're taking a load of risk away in terms of like, does this integrate with our other systems? How we caught all the bugs internally before, rather than just storing all that risk up until your big 6-month release. So you can de-risk all that, obviously. And the other one is, in the CRISP assessment, if you look at that, it's the process improvement. But there was also a little bit down in the corner around like kind of, are people happy? Because the easiest way to increase your number of releases is to make everybody work harder, work long hours, work weekends, make everybody's life miserable, right? So you have to balance it off with, are people happy? Is the process improving? Are people happy? And are we getting more stuff out the door? And that's the golden ticket for Agile, right? That's the big sell, is that you can do that. And if anyone has ever worked in those kinds of teams, it's a fantastic place to be. When you can do that stuff, it's like it actually becomes easier. Like at a point, there's a lot of work needs to be invested depending where you start from to get to the position of like, we've reduced so much waste, we've optimized, we've automated, we're not doing things that we're not adding value anymore. Now we're in a really good position. Sometimes it can take, a year, a couple of years. But when you get to that point, it can be a really fantastic place where it's like, we're doing so much more, we're so much more productive, and we're delivering so much more value, and it's so much easier for us, and it's so much more enjoyable. I used to work in a team, and we got to that point, and we played so much table tennis in the office that people used to kind of look at us and say like, "Well, God, these guys are hardly ever working." And we're the most productive team in the company, and all these other teams were like stuck in the kind of chained to the desk, not doing anywhere near the number of releases we had. We had got to the point where we were at continuous integration and like kind of just one step away from continuous deployment. It was like kind of press the button, right? It's ready to be deployed to production if you so choose, which was fantastic. And it's just any time then our product owner was saying like, "Can we do this?" It was like, "Yeah, we could have that out by tomorrow if you want." So it was like that kind of level of responsiveness and reactivity, and great fun in that team because they could do whatever they wanted during the day, and they were exploring and innovating. They became almost like everyone in the team was like a product owner because they had so much time to investigate and to play around with the system they were building as well. That they were like kind of, "Oh, hey, I never actually used this, but now that I am using it, wouldn't it be better if we did this instead of this? I could do that really quickly." Yeah, fantastic. So then that's more fun and more productive and more value to the customer, all the good stuff. We can do it.
When was your light bulb moment when you just went, "I've got it, and I know how this, I've got this now, I know how to like take this to the next team and how to work," because I'm still, the challenge that I've got is I'm still working with senior leaderships asking for these metrics who don't really know why they're asking for it, other than they think it's arbitrary to do with budgeting and cost and money. And they're still making comments like, "Oh, this agile nonsense, it's just an excuse not to do loads of paperwork and documentation." I'm still having that challenge now. Having those conversations with them is really difficult because they're just still not, I mean, they're not on the floor plate with the guys doing it. So that's already a problem. So when was your light bulb moment that I can take that away and share that with them?
I haven't had a lot. There is no silver bullet. There's no silver bullet. It's just about like kind of, I think it's about understanding the values of what you're trying to do, right? And kind of, there's two things. One is appreciating that every context is different because you might have a light bulb moment in one team and think, right, I'm going to take that forward to the next team. It's not going to work there. I've been in that position, right, and things have failed miserably. Sometimes lift and shift doesn't always work. You have to engage the brain and say, is this going to work here? Now, there are some patterns that are easier to try and lift and shift than others, right? You can do less damage by trying to do work in sprints, right? Okay, let's try and work in sprints over here. It might not work as well as it did here, but it's probably not going to cause huge amounts of damage. It depends on the context. So yeah, kind of appreciating where people are and what the new context is, and just having values around, like, and a picture of like what you think is right and wrong. And I think principles and values are really helpful for that. And we've got lots of them in Agile, and all the different flavors of Agile, they've got their own values and principles. So if we focus on that layer, the kind of the methods are secondary, really. It's like kind of, well, I know that we should be delivering, we want to release more frequently, and that's something, that's a principle I want to abide by. Now, if the methods we're using are not doing that in this team or that team or that team, then I can kind of work with it. One of the things for me is like, it's always, if it feels a little bit wrong, if it feels like this isn't the work that I should be doing, then that's when I stop and think about like kind of, maybe this isn't the right thing. Like, I could be wrong, absolutely, right? It's like, kind of, I could be getting the wrong end of the stick. But if like this situation where, I know in my organization currently, someone wants us to measure the developer productivity of these third-party teams. Now, that feels wrong to me, and I don't think that they're going to do the same with the internal teams. And I think there's something not quite right here, so I'm going to agitate a little bit here and try and get to the bottom of the question. I might not have the answer immediately, but I'll say, look, if that feels wrong to me, it feels more like we should be focusing on the outcomes rather than the activities for all these reasons. So you just have to kind of like, that's the skill of trying to be a change agent, I suppose, right? You have to apply it in any given context. So there's no silver bullet, unfortunately. Sorry. Any more? Is there any more questions?
It is 4:15 and there are queues at lunch.
Let's go.
I'll let people go, but then if you want to come up and ask
Yep.
questions around.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for the chats. Great questions. Thank you.